I pushed it to them. I said, hey, have you guys ever done a 3D scan? No, never heard of that. We're talking all the way from the C-suite executives all the way down to some of the interns that were working at the company. Everyone's jaws were on the floor.
On this episode of the RCN Podcast, the aerial intelligence expert, content creator, and founder of Pilot Byte, DylanGorman.
I was working on productions, FX down in Miami, music videos for platinum level artists. Also got to direct a web series for Nike. When I was starting to do it, there was not a lot of information about it, which is why I had to spend so much money to figure out.
Using YouTube, using LinkedIn, building a community could literally change the whole future of the built environment industries.
52,000 subscribers, which is insane. You know, this is not a life advice podcast, but...
Hey, yes it is. Yeah, here we are.
And that was probably one of the scariest things that I have ever done because I was just starting to learn. That was a life-changing moment for me, but I'm very humbled by it.
Welcome to the Reality Capture Network podcast. We are excited to have another fun conversation today. Dylan, thanks for joining us in the studio.
Well, I appreciate you having me come out after, honestly, an awesome conference that you held a month ago at the time of recording this. It was really cool to just be there at the Reality Capture Network conference here in Boise.
Yeah.
So, that was fun.
Thanks for coming out for it. And yeah, it is fun having you back so quick, come in and get to deep dive with you. That's one thing I love about podcasting is we go to conferences, we network, we meet all these people, and we really in conversation, in events and stuff, you really barely scratch the surface of who are you? What do you do? What's your background?
Right.
And unless you end up getting stage time, which you were on a panel at the conference, people will get to check out. But I love podcasts because it's really that deep dive of an individual and their journey, their story, where they came from, where they're going. It really lets us dig into individuals around the world in different focuses and learn about them. And I think there's so much we can extract just from listening to podcasts. You know, you get to learn different perspectives, expertise, and I always tell people whether it's my podcast or it's someone else's, you always you should listen to a ton of them and take everything with a grain of salt, but there's going to be something that you can take away from it. So excited to dig in with you.
Yeah, no, and honestly, just like you said, there's so many different podcasts, but what I like about this one is it revolves around the world of reality capture, which I think that's why most people are listening to this. And my sector or my niche is in the drone world, that's the fun one, right? Everybody's on the ground with their terrestrial scanners or their hand scanners, but I get to be the guy that's up in the air all the time, which is fun. Yep.
Awesome. Well, let's, what we like to do first before we go deep into the tech is go back to the story. I love doing that because I think there's something fun to learn about how someone even got into the industry. So take us back to where, what it was like growing up. What were you around career-wise? What did your parents do? And then take us into school and how you got into the industry.
My background is kind of interesting. Man, I don't even know where to start. Honestly, I was never really introduced into technology, just naturally. It was just, I kind of fell into it. My dad is from the military. My mom is from Brazil, and they kind of met together when my dad was a Marine security guard there. Cool. So really they didn't have much education. My dad literally went to college just to get into the Marine Corps and have his college paid for, and he doesn't even actually use his degrees that he has. Mm-hmm. Funny enough, my parents, they do a lot of real estate, so they were actually able to help kind of fund a lot of my interest very early on. They weren't necessarily hands-on with my education, they just wanted to let me explore. And I guess that is kind of how I found my way into drones, but actually way before drones, I found my way into technology. I mean, I was a young kid, right? I played video games. This is back when PlayStation 2 came out. Yep. They bought that for me. Was always just fascinated with just kind of the digital world of where all of these things came from, right? We're playing video games. We see all these cool buildings and cars, and anybody that plays Call of Duty has all the cool gun models.
Yes. Yeah.
So I was always fascinated with that, but I was also a tinker. So any electronic that my parents brought into the house, it would be, I would like to say, put back together as best as possible. But I always like to just try and figure out how these things worked. So that was just kind of how I started when I was younger, and it led into getting more interested in computers as I was getting more into playing computer games. So they kind of got me a really cheap laptop, kind of figured out how it worked, and then ultimately was able to convince my dad to buy me a gaming computer back when I was 11 or 12. But instead of buying me one, he actually made me build it myself. So he's like, I'm only going to buy this for you if you can source all the parts, find it, I'll buy it, and then you have to put it together. And if it works, it works. If not, you got to figure out how to make it work, which is cool. You know,
Nice.
it was cool to have that challenge from my father. But after that, started getting into doing a little bit of photography and videography. So I got my first iPhone. It was like the iPhone 3GS. It was a hand-me-down from my parents, and started just making, you know, some basic photos and video content of just random stuff. I mean, I was 12 years old at the time, so you know, what extravagant things can I do? But I was experimenting, and that led me down the path of getting more interested in learning about camera systems and all this other stuff, still going down that path of just technology in general, to the point where I actually convinced my dad to buy me a DSLR and also get me a drone. The drone at the time was the DJI Phantom, the original one that came out, 12 years ago. Yeah, that's insane, 12 years ago. So I convinced him to get that for me so I can do real estate photography, because my best friend, his dad was a real estate broker. So I was like, hey, get me these things. I'm going to be, you know, a real estate photographer. Long story short, I never became a real estate photographer. I actually got more into using the DSLR and drone for just making just my fun videos. But that was kind of my start into the drone industry. It was nothing extravagant. It was nothing commercialized like what I'm doing today. But it allowed me to just start learning about how this tech works, more so just in the creative sense. So that's kind of where my journey starts within the drone industry. Coming up on 11 years now, I have been flying drones almost every single day, which is kind of crazy. I have just about more time on the sticks than I think most people have with just really any other kind of device that they own. And I don't say that to boast. I say that because I'm proud of where I am today, just from experimenting and playing with all these things. So with kind of the background in doing production, actually way before I got into the commercial side of the drone industry, I was working on productions. So I got to work with FX down in Miami, working on a few TV shows. There's this one about Versace's murder that I got to work on, which was really cool. And that was the first time I got to get hands-on with an Inspire 2, which was awesome. Worked on a few music videos for platinum level artists of it down in Florida. That's actually where my home base is at. And then also got to direct a few web series for Nike, which was really, really cool. So I took that background, and at the time I was using drones for a lot of my work. So even though I had these big productions that I was doing, I was also doing some small, just fun YouTube videos, fun school projects, leveraging this camera technology, both on the ground and up in the air. And it wasn't until about 6 years ago that this opportunity fell into my lap. One of my buddies who I actually met on one of the sets, he was using drones. At the time, it was a Phantom 3 Advanced or something like that for his client, who was a real estate developer. And they were building warehouses, and they also did brokerage too. So they were selling some of the massive office buildings in Tampa, Florida. And he came to me, he said, hey, I know you're pretty good with this stuff, and obviously we work together on set, so I know you're capable of capturing this cinematography stuff for them, more in a marketing sense for commercial real estate. So we got together, and he's like, hey, here's an opportunity. They want to see something different. They want to see something more creative. And at the time, I had seen some of these YouTube videos about DroneDeploy. So just started learning about photogrammetry. And again, this was 6 years ago. DroneDeploy today is completely different than the DroneDeploy that came about 6 years ago. And so I saw those demos online, went into the office, did a full presentation to the CEO of this company who was going to approve this. And it was nice because his buddy, his best friend, his dad was the CEO of the company. So that was kind of my dumb luck into the industry. But my buddy, who actually ended up becoming my business partner later on in this story, presented this to me, and I pushed it to them. I said, hey, have you guys ever done a 3D scan of your properties before? He's like, no, never heard of that. I was like, okay, I'll come back in 2 days and let me show you what you get. Let me show you guys what I can do. So literally got my trial of DroneDeploy. flew a few test projects at my house, made sure, it was working, went out the next day, and probably flew that site. It was a pre-construction site. So they just had done the earthworks on it.
Yeah.
Right. So everything was fully leveled out. So fairly easy for me to go and start capturing data on it. But what I did is I made sure that I actually got it. So I flew that site 6 times before I even returned back home, and basically used my trial to process all of that data. I came in Friday of that same week, had everybody in the office. We're talking like 15 people, all the way from the C-suite executives all the way down to some of the interns that were working at the company. And everyone's jaws were on the floor. Mm-hmm. They were like, this is insane. We've never seen anything like this before. And it wasn't until people just started making jokes of like, hey, zoom into that truck there. Oh, that's John's truck. Look at all the stuff he has back there. And that's when I just started looking around the room and all the light bulbs started going off. People were like, wait, can you do measurements here? What's the volume of this? Can you do cut and fill? These were all terms that I just started learning literally on the spot. Yeah. And I was like, let me put together, a finalized presentation for you. And that's essentially what I did. So I came in the following week, and included a lot of the video, the photos, panoramas, and the full model to them. And from that point on, they said, we want you to go out to the site every week or every other week and start doing progress updates for us. And the opportunity that my buddy gave to me for this, we were like, why don't we just start this as a business? Because I started making more money doing that, and it was just the initial project than some of the other projects that I was doing before. Even though I've worked with platinum level artists and worked with Nike, I was making more money in a commercialized sense with drones compared to the creative aspect from it. And I mean, from there, they started giving us other projects. It started spreading word of mouth. We started working with other contractors in Tampa, Florida, and it was nothing that I have ever experienced before. It was very humbling, but it was really cool to be able to leverage this tech to the point where a year and a half later, we caught the eyes of this software company. And the software company, they created digital twins of the interior of properties. So think commercial real estate in a sense of you have your Kroger or your Publix or your Target, and they have all the smaller stores next to it, a shopping center, essentially. So this company, they have had thousands of properties in their system with digital twins of inside, all the way down to getting serial numbers on HVAC units, where the plumbing runs, where the electrical outlets are, everything on a space for prospective tenants to come in and understand the space, but also property managers to understand how that space is operating and really just everything that's there. But they were still leveraging Google Maps for the outside, the exterior view of these properties, which can be up to 2 to 3 years old. So they caught wind of what we were doing, and I came in, did another presentation for them. And it was actually pretty cool because we had Publix as one of our clients from our existing client that we had. They also worked with Publix too, but on that other sense. One did the developing, this one helped with the management of it. So they were like, okay, well, let's plug this directly into our system. So we generated an orthomosaic for them, plugged it into their model, and they're like, we love this. So did some trials, actually flew all the way up to Illinois, down in Chicago. And I was bootstrapping everything at the time too. Basically, I had one credit card with a $500 max on it. I was like, booking my flight and my hotel and my rental car all for $500 just to go prove this project out. And that was probably one of the scariest things that I have ever done, because I was just starting to learn about credit cards and everything. So I literally paid for all of that, did the sample project for them, came back, and they presented it to their client. Client loved it. This client has 300 something properties just in their portfolio. And they basically awarded it to us. So a few weeks later, we got a contract. It's about a $160,000 contract, back from just making $250 to $400 a flight. We now secured a $160,000 contract, and basically it hit the Southeast. Got a travel trailer. My girlfriend came with me, and we basically traveled around for a month and a half, capturing all these properties. And halfway through, actually, that entire project, they offered to buy us out. And this was only working with them for 3 months, which was insane. So partner and I sold our company to them, and I basically managed their entire drone program, still doing the same stuff.
Yep.
So we did a bunch of just drone mapping for their clients, and these clients were JLL, CBRE, BlackRock, Kimco, Brixmor, like some of the biggest REITs in the US. They have over 400 clients that we got to work with, which is really, really cool.
Awesome.
And that was probably a life-changing moment for me, to the point where now I started to manage a fleet of well over 100 pilots all across the US, built my own training programs to the point where we were capturing 150 to 200 properties a week.
That's awesome.
We averaged about 2,500 properties a year. And around towards the end of my time there, I left December of last year. I started making some YouTube videos, just teaching people, showcasing, hey, these are some of the things that you can do with drones within the industry. And that just started taking off by itself. So I stayed at that company for a year and 8 months, left in December of last year, and now I've been doing my own thing, Pilot Bite, for the last 11 months. And it has been such a wild journey, but it has been really cool because I am now able to just educate a lot of the people. And I gave you the last 6 years of me doing this. Very early on, I didn't know really what photogrammetry was and how all this stuff worked. And some of the mentors that I got to work with, understanding how the technology worked, understanding, some of the surveying stuff behind it and some of the GIS stuff behind it, got me to a point where I am now able to teach this instead of having other people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars that I spent figuring all of this stuff out. And that's what I'm doing now. So I've been actually running around the US a second time this year, hosting workshops, teaching drone photogrammetry and mapping, doing LiDAR demos, working with different companies to showcase technology on aerial platforms. And it's
awesome.
It's been a wild ride. It's been a lot of fun, but it's given me opportunities like this to meet you and some of the other cool people within the industry that revolve around reality capture.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing the story. It's funny that you kind of fell into it and it was so long ago. That was pretty early for getting in and starting to do some of the mapping. I feel like the drone industry really has gone from almost nothing to mainstream in 10 years.
It's insane.
And it still feels like, I try to come up with a guess of a percentage of how many companies are really adopting these technologies that should be. And even though it's grown a lot in the last 10 years, I feel like
there's still a lot more room for
20% of the people that should be using it are using it.
Right.
I think we have so much opportunity for growth still. It's what excites me. And I think we maybe have a similar interest or mission now where we used to do services. I got started doing survey and then doing scanning, but grew to the point that now I realized, okay, I think I can make an even bigger impact by helping educate and build other people to be able to do the work, because I see there's so much need. And we spent so many years going through the headaches and realizing nobody's helping people overcome the headaches.
No.
There needs to be a focus on trying to bring awareness to the tools, bring awareness to the use cases, and then help people learn how to do it properly. That brings me to want to go back in your story a little bit and go to, if you can think of some of the headaches or some of the pain points you had when you started using the tech in a commercial application, what were and or are some of the challenges that you see?
Yeah, and actually this is kind of a two-parter because it's really what inspired me to start doing the education. But yeah, when I was starting to do it, there was not a lot of information out about it, which is why I had to spend so much money to figure out, because I had to make a lot of mistakes to understand what not to do for clients and not screw up another project. There was not a lot of education, not a lot of information out there. There was no such thing as drone programs in high school or college. And I actually didn't even go to college for any of this stuff. A lot of this stuff was just dumb luck, but also finding the right people at the right time. I had a lot of very, very helpful mentors in several different industries, not necessarily the drone industry, but other industries that were directly had benefited from drones for data acquisition, because that's all a drone really is a tool to acquire data, to really help me understand how this stuff actually works on a fundamental level.
Yep.
And it leads me into, again, the reason why I started this is, even though I worked with hundreds of different pilots that we contracted to capture all this data, most of them didn't actually really know what they were doing. We gave them a login, right? They would go capture the data, but then oftentimes I would say about, 25, 30% of the pilots that we had would change a lot of the settings, which I had those preset settings for our overlap and the height that we're flying, because I needed to achieve a certain resolution on our maps and a certain accuracy. Well, when they started changing things around, that kind of screwed it up for us and started making me realize, okay, these guys actually don't really understand how this tech works. They're just, they're just getting paid to capture data, but they don't know why they're capturing the data.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons, again, why I started doing these YouTube videos that I put out there. And I think it has helped a lot of people understand and realize that drones are a little bit more sophisticated as tools than some of the companies make it out to be.
Oh yeah.
Obviously DJI, right? They're the biggest consumer and enterprise drone seller here in the US, which is starting to change a little bit, but they make their tools so easy and intuitive. It's like when you go buy an iPhone, most people know how to use an iPhone.
Yep.
But if you give somebody an Android, right, a tool that can do a whole lot more than an iPhone, they're like, I don't know, I just want to install an app. But then they realize that you can actually do more with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was one of the struggles, and it really still is a struggle.
Oh yeah.
Within this industry. I talk to so many different people. I now consult for a lot of engineering and survey firms to help them understand what these tools can do for them. Right? Just like what you said, even though the tools exist, not a lot of people understand, one, how they can benefit off of it, but two, how they work for their workflows. So it's been great to come in to help educate and explain what the tools use cases are, what they can and what they cannot do in a business's workflow.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think that is still such a big struggle, is that a lot of technologies, from drone to scanner to any of them, they get made out to be super simple. And a lot of times that deeper education is not given at all. And so today, people are still struggling with the same things that they were struggling with 10 years ago, of like, they don't understand when they should use control, or how much they need, or what happens with the data if you don't, or what's the difference between, using the LiDAR or the photogrammetry. What am I like? It's like whoever they get a hold of that's a salesperson teaches them exactly what that person wants to tell them to try to sell them the gear, but then there's not a lot of...
There's nothing after the fact.
Yeah. And that's where I think you, myself, a few others that we've even talked with, it's like we're starting to see some people realize that and say we need to focus on trying to fulfill this gap of educating people, because it hurts the industry when people do things wrong. And at this point, some of those, what we would think doing it for so long, are simple mistakes. It's like nobody should make those anymore. We should be able to teach and educate enough to the point that everybody who goes and buys a drone or a scanner or whatever the device is, they get some type of education that helps them avoid some of these simpler mistakes.
At least the fundamentals. And that's what I'm trying to push out there with a lot of the education that I do, whether it's my in-person workshops, my online course, or my virtual workshops. Even the consulting that I do is just to help build that fundamental base. And I think that is also probably another point, right? Being in the service industry, half of getting the jobs is educating your client what you can do for them. Right? And if they don't understand that using a drone can get them the data X amount faster, more efficient, and even just more data in general than sending a guy boots on the ground, obviously depending on the application of it, then they're most likely probably not going to go with you and just go with, the good old, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of method. And that's probably one of the things that we face a lot with, and I'm not shaming surveyors at all. I think the ones that get it get it. Just like when GPS first came out, there's a lot of uproar of like, why would I trust that? But now if you're not using a GPS, you're missing out on a lot of projects.
Yeah.
Where now if you don't adopt some of these other technologies, and not just aerial lidar and photogrammetry, but some of the newer total stations, some of the newer GPS units, some of the newer functionality that's coming out with tech, they're going to start falling behind.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you first started getting on YouTube, what was your initial thought? Like, did you follow YouTubers and you planned to like do this big channel, or did you start using it educational, or how did you get started on that side?
I watch a lot of YouTube, more than I think anything else, even more than Netflix. I have a YouTube premium account. And I've been, like I said, I've been driving around the country twice this year, and I think I've logged well over 400 or 500 hours on YouTube just this trip alone, which is kind of crazy.
Yep.
But that has always been me. I mean, I'm a millennial through and through, and that was kind of my form of entertainment.
Yep.
And being in the production industry and watching a lot of some of the YouTubers that do the production stuff, I've always knew that I wanted to get into YouTube, but not to the size that I hit. I always thought it was just going to be something fun that I can do. And I had no expectations going into it. I more so just wanted to educate people and showing, hey, this is something cool that I'm doing, and I just kind of want to share it and show people, hey, these are some cool tools that you can use with drones, or use cases that you can use with drones. And as of recording this, I'm at 52,000 subscribers, which is insane.
Yeah.
This year alone, I've done 1.8 million views.
Yep.
Last year I did 2 million, I believe. And yeah, I mean, it's insane. Just kind of the growth, but also the visibility and people that I've been able to connect with. It's not just 100% in the US. It's actually more of 48% of the people that watch are from the US, and everybody else is around the world.
Yep.
Which is cool, because this tech is not just used here in quote unquote a first world country.
Yeah.
It's used all over the world for so many different applications, but it's cool to be able to reach that kind of audience outside of just screaming into a silo like a Twitter or a LinkedIn or something else, right? You get more visibility on the second biggest search engine in the world. So yeah, my expectations were not, I didn't have any expectations, to be honest. It just happened.
Yep.
But I'm very humbled by it, because everyone that watches on there in one form or another has been able to learn at least one thing.
Yep.
And that's really my mission. That's my goal, is to teach somebody at least one thing from my videos.
Yeah, that's awesome. What did it look like when you got started versus like how many years what did your growth look like over those years? And or, when you first got started, how did you feel about like how many followers you had and how many views? Tell us that story a little bit. Or when it changed, when the growth started.
It changed last year in May, which is when I started taking it serious. I've been doing it for 2 years now. My first actual YouTube video came out in, I believe it was June of 2021. And the second video I posted after that, which was like 2 weeks after, is the video that holds the most views on my channel. I think it's like 1 million something views that I have on it. My second YouTube video.
Wow.
Which is insane.
That is.
But that video didn't gain traction until almost 6 months later. That video was maybe sitting at 4,000, 5,000 views, and it wasn't until May of last year where in a span of 2 weeks, I hit 350,000 views in 2 weeks, which is insane. And then it started trickling in more after that. It hit another spike, I believe, beginning of this year, going from 500,000 to 880,000 in a span of a month between, I think, February and March of this year. So it was insane. And that just kind of shows you the power of having evergreen content. But also since then, I've also had other videos that have done well over 100,000, 200,000. I have a video right now that I posted 3 months ago. In the first 48 hours, it hit 100,000 views. It's almost at 500,000 views right now, which is insane. So I would say I've definitely kind of figured out the quote unquote YouTube game, because it is a game.
Yep.
It's a game of numbers and how you use your words.
Yep.
But I don't use that in a deceiving way, right? I want to make sure that I can hit my target audience, which is whether you're an enthusiast or you're a professional. I just want to be able to present a brand new idea.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the numbers and whatnot, yes, it's exciting. And I didn't necessarily have goals early on, but now that this is my full-time thing, yes, I have goals that I want to hit, but I still want to make sure that I'm reaching the proper audience. I'm not going to create clickbait. All of my stuff is very meticulous when I craft it. Again, having that production background, I understand how to put together a video with beginning, middle, and end, which is to create a captivating story.
Yep.
But I want to be entertaining, but also educational. And a lot of the educational content in the drone industry on YouTube is not, you can't watch it because it's 45 minutes long and it's somebody that's talking in front of a PowerPoint.
Yep.
Where for me, I want to make it engaging. I want to make it entertaining and have people go through this story with me to get them from the beginning, middle, and end of what is this idea? How do we get there? And all the steps leading up to the final product to deliver to a prospective client, or maybe a new thought, or maybe a new idea that they can embed into their workflows or their business. So that's kind of the thought process behind now versus how it was then. Yeah.
No, and I think that just leads to, this is part of like what we talked about on our panel at the conference, right? Is like, what are some, new marketing tactics and ways to educate, ways to build audience, ways to influence people. And, obviously there's a lot of like social media influencers out there that they don't care who's following them. They don't care what content's going out as long as they get numbers.
Yep.
But when you actually dig in, like some of us in the industry are, and you being one of them, is like, how can I actually use what's possible with building a following and getting those views in a way that actually educates people or helps solve industry problems? It's not all about the subscriber count. That helps, and the growth helps. If you're growing, it means you're sharing something that's valuable to people. But the content itself is just as important as the followers, right?
Absolutely.
Like if you can impact 500 people, that's amazing. If you can get to 1 million, amazing.
Even better,
but like impacting 100 people is amazing. I think sometimes people that are on social too have gotten to the point that like, you hear numbers and you're like, oh, you only have 100,000. You're like, because other people, in other industries have millions of followers,
or
but
hundreds of millions.
If you actually stop and think about how many people that is, like that's a lot of people that are being impacted.
It's insane. I mean, looking at my subscriber count, I'm from Tampa, Florida, and I'm a big hockey fan. So we have our Tampa Bay Lightning there, and I can fill our stadium with the amount of subscribers, which that's insane to think of.
Yeah.
I think it's like 37,000 people that can fit in our stadium.
Yep.
So that and then some is what I can fill with my subscriber count.
Following you.
That are following me, which is insane. But I think more to your point is it's not necessarily all about the numbers. Yes, it's great, and I'm always going to celebrate those milestones.
Yep.
But it's the credibility behind it. Right, when I have companies like DJI and DroneDeploy and Wingtra and several other companies value my opinion and want to work with me and demonstrate their technology on my platform, it's very validating, but also gives me a lot of credibility.
Yep.
Because I do know what I'm talking about, because I have been that guy in the field that has spent hundreds of hours, thousands of dollars trying to figure out how to make these things work. And when a company can come to me and I can figure it out for them almost instantly, or at least in a fraction of the time that it took me or even them for how long they've been spending on it, then that's where really the value gets created. And with that, it's also been really cool to meet people in person in the wild, meeting people at conferences such as at your conference last month and at DroneDeploy conference, meeting people in person saying, wow, the reason I am here is because of you.
Yep.
That makes the whole thing for me. Like that is so so powerful in itself, and it makes me feel like I'm actually doing a good job helping people, inspire them, get them into the industry, because that's what I'm trying to do. Not only am I trying to innovate, but inspire, educate, and just bring more attention to this industry, because most of the people on YouTube that look up drone content is more so looking at it as like, okay, what is the specs of the drone? How far can this drone fly? Like stuff that I don't care about. And most people, I think, in our industry don't really care about. They want to know what can the hardware do and how can I leverage it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, using the tools in a way to solve problems.
Real problems, not...
Yes.
Yep. I don't have enough 4K in my video anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What technology do you see changing, or has changed recently, or you think will be changing in the drone space that's making a big impact, or will, whether it's new sensors, new processes, AI for capture, like what's something that maybe people that haven't been really deep into it or doing their research, what's changed recently or will, you think?
I actually answered this question a few days ago on a webinar. One of the things that's changing is hardware accessibility on the price side of it. So right now I am flying with this $35,000 LiDAR sensor that is spitting out just incredible data that would have cost you $500,000 a few years ago.
Yeah.
On a device, on a drone, an M300, that's giving me 35 minutes of flight time, which is insane. Where just 5 years ago, that $500,000 plus another $60,000 on a drone would have only gotten you 12 minutes of flight time.
Mm-hmm.
And the processes behind it were also very extensive. So hardware accessibility is coming more accessible for people. I mean, DJI, they just announced their new L2 sensor, and you can buy it for under $15,000, which is insane.
Yeah.
There's specifically the Mavic 3 Enterprise. If that drone came out when I first started, I would have made so much freaking money with that drone.
Yep.
Because you're getting 45 minutes of flight time with a mechanical shutter with RTK capabilities. Like a drone like that would have cost $25,000 back when the Phantom 4 came out.
Yep.
Which is insane. So hardware accessibility is one thing. I think software is coming a long way. Software used to be very clunky back then. You used to have to use supercomputers to process a lot of this stuff. Now with what NVIDIA is coming out with their advanced cloud computing capabilities with their graphics cards is just speeding up the process for us to visualize this data in a rapid sense compared to sending the data off to a render farm and then waiting another week, to get your full model and all your deliverables. And if you made one mistake, back to the server farm it goes. So software is coming a long way. And I think probably the third is just more interesting companies coming to this space with their ideas or their twist on the technology. So one of the companies that I'm working with right now, Rock Robotic, especially Harrison himself, he's been pushing the industry to have LiDAR be more accessible, where there's a lot of other companies out there that have very, very expensive sensors that aren't even necessarily getting even anywhere close to what his sensor is putting out. And he believes in, and it's people like him and other companies like him that are trying to push that accessibility for everybody. So companies having their own twist on it, and just making it easier to use. Like one of my clients that I helped out with earlier this year, they were quoted $200,000 to do 300-acre LiDAR topo, which is insane.
Yeah.
I got them set up with a $70,000 solution, and since then they've probably done about 35 projects.
Yeah.
Where before, when they were subcontracting it out, maybe 2 or 3 a year.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think that goes for, again, kind of all tech in this space, is that sometimes people are afraid of it getting cheaper or being faster, and it's like all that's going to do is allow more volume.
Exactly.
If it's too expensive or too difficult, then it's really hard for companies, especially large companies, to justify doing it all the time. It's like one-off unique projects, but as it becomes easier, we can scale the adoption of how it's being used. It's replacing old workflows, and there's still challenges with that. The other piece I'd throw in there is that sometimes people only want to go with the cheaper option, and that's also scary.
Yes.
Which is also where education's needed, is whether you're a user of the tool or you're someone hiring someone to come do it, there has to be that understanding of like, wait a minute, what type of technology should be used on this type of job? You know, when is photogrammetry a better option than aerial LiDAR or a terrestrial scanner? Or, you know, this quote doesn't say anything about ground control and this one does. Why? I feel like that education piece is still needed to make sure that things are being done properly.
It also bridges all the gaps too, right? You have all of this great technology that's coming out, which, yes, we do want access to that. But at the same time, the users of the technology need to understand what problems does it solve and what does it not solve.
Yep.
Right? You can't just throw LiDAR as the answer for every 3D modeling project with drones, because it's not necessary.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people like, well, if I spent $5,000 on a drone, then I can make this amount. Whereas if I spent $70,000 on a LiDAR setup, then I can charge this much more. I'm like, sure you can, but who's actually really going to pay for it if you don't really know what you're selling?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when working with companies. They're like, well, I want to go with this cheaper LiDAR option. I'm going to spend $5,000 on this as opposed to the $35,000 sensor. I'm like, well, do you know what you're going to get yourself into? Is sure, you're going to save $5,000 or save $20,000 or $25,000 here, but then think about all the time in the office that you're going to have to go and fix all that data where you could have just saved it with spending a little bit more.
Yep.
So
what do you think? So hardware is becoming more accessible. It's becoming cheaper. It's becoming easier to use. What do you think are still some of the pain points that companies are running into when they're trying to build a drone program? They're trying to select hardware. They're trying to use it on projects. What are some of the biggest pain points or struggles that you still see in the companies you talk with?
A lot of it actually comes down to just the data itself. Regardless of what hardware you use and software you use, it's the actual data. It's the deliverables that they are either creating or they're receiving from somebody. I am still working through with the surveyor, trying to have him understand what a DEM model is, and he's like, I don't know like how I can use this, and I've explained it to him multiple times, and even have brought some of my other survey friends and explained this is what DEM models can do. He's like, well, I still don't see the value in it. Where for others, it's saving them a lot of time and a lot of money in trying to interpret it, where he's still kind of just stuck on square one, back with the, I don't trust the GPS kind of thing. Data is always going to be a limiting factor if you don't know how to leverage it. Because at the end of the day, all of these sensors, all of these tools that exist, whether they're aerial-based, ground-based, or even underwater-based, they all just capture data. And it's how you interpret it, how you analyze it, how you visualize it, that's going to make the difference. The way that an engineer is going to use a point cloud is completely different than what a surveyor is going to use it for, completely different than a video game artist is going to use it for.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you obviously get a lot of inquiries about drone stuff, and you've been traveling around doing workshops, stuff like that. What are the use cases or industries that you think are kind of adopting it the most, or what areas do you think are not yet adopting it that should, or you see it growing potentially?
I think the most common use case or industry is definitely surveying and mapping. That's kind of the inception of why drones were first started to being leveraged. Inspection for infrastructure is taking off like wildfire, no pun intended, with what's going on out on the West Coast. But there's a lot of states making it almost mandatory for a drone program, and not necessarily states, but more so these companies like, I don't know if I want to name drop, but a lot of the power companies out on the West Coast are now making it mandatory to have a drone program to do these inspections. And again, when it comes down to having more accessible tools, more affordable, it makes it easier to capture a lot of this data and even just be safer and save a lot of lives. Some of the more interesting markets that are starting to leverage this tech is I would say the video game and the cultural heritage. actually spoke to one of our friends who was showing us a really cool data set, which we can't really talk about.
But it was cool.
But it was probably one of the coolest use cases I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Basically digitizing a famous amphitheater with thousands of drone photos and lots of laser scans to preserve this beautiful piece of architecture. So there's a bunch of different niche industries that are starting to leverage it too. But I would say probably the infrastructure and inspection is one that's just taking off like crazy, because we're also starting to see a lot of companies create AI and ML tools to help with auto detections of it too, whether it's cracks or rusting or just leakage, whatever it may be. Interpreting just all this data that we're throwing at it is actually honestly really fascinating.
Yeah. I think that's one of the areas that there's the most room for just advancement and improvement is like...
And we need it too.
Yeah.
Especially with our infrastructure here in the US.
Yeah. Well, I think is the use of the data. Like there's now so many sensor types. There's all this way to collect data from phones to DSLRs to drones, LiDAR, photogrammetry, but seeing software companies actually just dig in of like, how can we create tools to use that in a more unique way? I think that's the biggest opportunity moving forward is taking one data set that's captured for whatever reason, like whether it was for a drone project, it was capture the building, but now you can use it for, the actual architectural piece, or you can use it for visual effects, or you can use it for safety training, or you can taking that data and multiplying it also then just increases the value. It helps, those that are looking to purchase it use it in more ways. It's really cool to see the uses and different sensor types, things like that.
Absolutely. And I've actually been demonstrating some unique use cases of it too. Luma AI and Polycam, they've been putting out some just fascinating tools recently, and it's free, which is like just mind blowing, where I've demonstrated leveraging as simple as a video from a drone to create a full 3D model in a Nerf and a Gaussian splatting, like insane.
Yeah.
And people are now starting to take my idea, which I put them out there so that people can actually leverage it to make money off of it.
Oh yeah.
Which is cool. Something as simple as what Luma AI and Polycam are doing can be expanded tenfold to what capturing reality is doing within Unreal Engine, to what DroneDeploy is doing, where they completely rebuilt a lot of their engines and having even tighter data being processed on their side. So with the evolution of these tools, we're now going to start seeing some of them come out more cheaply and even free in a lot of sense, which I think helps inspire innovation within just simple stuff. Sometimes you just have to start with the basics before you can build the pyramid per se. Which is what I think a lot of people kind of flip that upside down. They're like, well, we got to think super big and then build small. No, sometimes you just got to start small. Sometimes you just go buy that $500 drone just to see what it can do and then build from there. Where other people are like, no, we're going to go spend $100,000 on this. I'm like, all right, well, have fun having that sit in your office and collecting dust the rest of its lifetime.
I try to tell people that a lot, is if you want to get into a technology you're not yet, like start small. Go buy the cheap drone, rent a scanner, find someone who has one and trial a job. Or, there's also so many different types of drones and scanners. It's like there's an opportunity for you to kind of get to test them before you go out and run and go for the pyramids. Don't go for the biggest, piece yet. Like learn how to use the little stone mover first before you try to build.
Don't try to bring the big tuna in. You can get all our little Spanish mackerel first, and then, we'll go from there. But I think that's also where education can kind of fall into that space too. Right. Where I have a lot of people that come to me and ask saying, hey, should I go and spend $5,000-$6,000 on this drone setup? Because if I do that, then I can't, afford to learn about it. And I say, how about you flip it the other way around? Spend a few $100s on education. And I don't tell them to go with me. I say, you can go with me or you can go with somebody else to teach you about this stuff. And the hundreds or a few $1,000s that you spend on just the education may allow you to realize that maybe that's not what you want to do, as opposed to spending a ton of money on hardware, which, first of all, you're never going to get that money back unless you actually put it into use. And, just trying to sell it off after you buy it, it's going to do you no good. But also just getting that education will inspire as well. And that's what I also do in my workshops is I give several different industries some case studies that I have that I talk about. One of my favorite ones that I'd like to talk about is the Notre Dame. When that burned down 5 years ago, I asked people, how do you think they're able to reconstruct it? And everyone's like, I don't know. And I just tell them, a video game, Assassin's Creed 3, a game that came out 10 years ago, more like a game that was built 15 years ago that leveraged photogrammetry and laser scans. And when people have that light bulb go off, then it starts giving them ideas of some of the other ways they can leverage this technology just by coming and just learning about it, as opposed to just sinking money into it and then figuring it as you go, which that's what I did. And I have learned very hard that that is not what you're supposed to do. Don't be a yes man to everything. Always kind of pick a niche, or at least find ways to get inspired within an industry, and then find somebody that you can work with to really just push you forward.
No, that's one of my favorite things at this point, is just inspiring people to do something different. Is like, I see a lot of businesses out there that are not yet deep into the technology. They don't have innovation teams. They're just kind of still doing things the old way, the normal way. And, like you talked about with your upbringing, right? You were in gaming. It was interesting. You got into these environments. Well, that's like all of the new workforce, right? And so for companies to start thinking ahead like that, or to even inspire young people that are not in the industry yet and show them, hey, the built environment world, the construction industry, the surveying and engineering and mapping and architecture, like all of these industries, one, they're very critical. They build and run the world. Roads, bridges, treatment plants, airports, like
without them, we're screwed.
They're critical. And yet everybody in these industries is talking about the challenge of bringing new hires, and there's a lack of resources and nobody's entering the trades, and we've got problems, and yet innovation and technology could help us overcome some of those problems. And they can also be the tool that inspires younger people to want to get into these industries. So it's part of what excites me about using influencership, using YouTube, using LinkedIn, building a community, building visibility, is just trying to educate and inspire people could literally change the whole future of the built environment industries. Like inspiring people bringing in the tools that are game changing, and helping shape the future of how we do work.
No, absolutely. Encouraging and having that environment is powerful in itself. And it was actually one of your panelists spoke about it, saying he pays for 2 audiobooks every single month for his employees. He has made it a mission to have education be a pillar within their organization. And I found that incredible. Right? Where a lot of corporations don't inspire, do not have the quote unquote availability to pay for education, where when I was working my corporate job for 1 year and 8 months, I asked my boss, I said, hey, can you invest into this course, or maybe just this little thing, because I want to learn a little bit more about it to see how we can apply it for us. Because at the end of the day, it's going to make him more money, not necessarily me. Right? So, and I think that's probably one thing a lot more workforces need to initiate, have the availability, even just set aside some funds to just pay for education, because realistically, it's going to pay itself back 10 times more if you give people the room to grow and expand their mind. Because if they're stuck in a box their entire life, how are you ever going to innovate? You can't.
Yeah. And what I've seen is I think it's important for companies to try to do that. And I also try to tell everyone that
regardless,
if your company doesn't, like, you should too. You hear a lot of successful people say the best investment you can make is in yourself.
Absolutely.
And I learned that early on in starting my first business of like, I get to choose if I want to spend my money on going to this workshop or this event or this conference where I think that I'm going to learn something about business, or I'm going to learn something about marketing, or I'm going to get inspired, and starting to do that a few times, I started realizing that those people saying invest in yourself is not some scheme of like they want you to buy their thing. It's like, no, when you spend your time and your money on learning, it opens your mind to different possibilities. It makes you think outside the box. You start getting creative with like, wait, I saw this other guy talk about how he used this tool in this way. Well, I'm in this industry and they're not doing that. I think I could bring this tool here. I think I could use that marketing scheme over here. Like, you learning as a person, if your company's not investing in you doing it, you should do it, because it's going to create more career opportunity for you. Whether you end up using that inside of the business you're in to upsell and say, hey, I'd like to start a drone program in our company because I learned that we can use it this way. Now you as a person in your business become more valuable. Or there's also the scenario that you're still in a company that shuts you down. Well, now you have a skill set that you can take out and find a company who is innovative, that wants to grow, that's willing to take that. So whether your company does it or you do it yourself, being open to learning, spending your own time on it, spending your money on it, it's going to help you and or your company.
And it's going to help you just excel in life in general. This is not a life advice podcast, but
hey, yes, it is. Yeah, here we are.
But no, just in general, I mean, I'm actually really glad that I invested in myself, because I don't have a college degree. I don't have a fallback, right? I always had that kind of fire underneath my ass to just figure it out.
Yep.
And I'm grateful for my parents for allowing me to have that opportunity to just figure things out. I'm still figuring things out. I've only been doing this thing full time 11 months, and I still don't have everything figured out. Yep. But for some reason, things are just kind of working, itself out. And yeah, I do appreciate, my boss for allowing me to get into some of these other opportunities for other education to help myself out, because it also helped their business out too. But it also allowed me to get very unique opportunities to work with very specific people within the industry. And without that initial approval from the boss, I don't think I'd be able to be here today without that. So I think it's just extremely important to, if someone's not going to allow you to do it, well, you need to just take matters into your own hands, regardless of what it is. Even if it's just a little YouTube video that you watch, on your lunch break or whatever. Just find something that inspires you to do something better within the industries that you're working in. Because again, the reality capture industry is massive, but it's also really small too.
Yeah. I said that the other day on LinkedIn, and someone was arguing with me. I was like, reality capture is still really a niche market. And someone's commenting back that it's not. And I'm like, well, those of us that are deep in it, sometimes we start to think, oh man, this is becoming really far spread. I know so many companies that do scanning or drone work. But still, if you step back and look at, okay, yes, there's a lot of people adopting it, but how many are not yet? If you really look at percentage of adoption, and even the people that are adopting it are still only implementing it in 10% of the area they could be, it is a niche, very niche industry. The biggest companies in the world that are adopting scanning, how big is their team that actually does it within their business of 100,000 people? They got 40. So as we see the need and the demand for scanning and for drones and for BIM and for all of these things continue to grow, that little team inside that big corporation is not going to be enough to sustain it. Yeah. And there's also not enough individuals doing it. So that's why I think what we're focusing on with raising awareness, trying to create education opportunities, train people to do things properly, it's critical in order for the direction of everything, to be possible.
Absolutely. And I actually was at DroneDeploy conference early last month, and was listening to the VDC director at White's, massive construction company, I think the 7th oldest here in the US. And his team, I think, is maybe like 20 something people. And he still says that there's not enough guys on his VDC team for what they're doing at all. Talk to people at Turner Construction, talk to people at Core. They're all in the same boat.
Yep.
Right? These are massive multi-billion-dollar companies that are doing billions of dollars a year in projects. And their team is consisted of anywhere from 5 to 40 people.
Yeah. Which
is insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. And yeah, one of their struggles is that not a lot of people understand the tech.
Yeah.
In forcing on different projects on how to leverage them, but also how to get the whole company to be on board with it, because it's still really new to them. And like, I don't understand how to do this. Sure, you're going to send a drone on site, but what can I do with that? And they're even having to do small education pieces within their company. So it's cool to see massive multi-billion-dollar companies. And I'm not saying it's cool to see them struggle, but it's interesting to see that you could have all the money in the world and all the resources, but your team is still the smallest and still needs a lot of training, a lot of education. It just needs more people within it too. So it's good to see that, though. It gives opportunity for those that are wanting to start getting into this space. You don't have to, like you and I, we don't have a college degree, but we have generated millions of dollars for our clients. Right? So if we can do that, literally anybody can. It just takes a matter of, finding, whether it's that right finding a mentor, or just getting that education on it and learning what you can do with it, and then finding that path. It's not easy.
No.
Not easy at all.
Nothing great comes easy, right? Like, people should be wanting and willing. If they want to try to do something great, you got to be willing to go through some pain
and sacrifice,
and through some struggle and some sacrifice. And I think that's an area that a lot of people struggle too in the built environment industry, construction industry, survey, is that a lot of times people are not willing to go through the pain of trying to adopt something new. It's like, if it can't get implemented on the job tomorrow and be successful, they shut it down. And that's where,
it kills a lot of opportunity.
It does.
A lot.
And people need to overcome that and realize all innovation takes time. It takes work. You have to be willing to struggle through it a little bit for it to reach, a point of transformation.
It's funny because I have this tattoo on my forearm. It's in Japanese, and it says "succeed through failure."
Mm-hmm.
And I get that from my dad.
Awesome.
He was in the Marine Corps, and he just pushed through a lot of stuff all the time. Even with his businesses that he has now, he did 16 years and left because he started his own commercial real estate company.
Awesome.
Basically, and has built several businesses since then, has sold some of them failed, and has basically taught me everything about business that I know today. It was all through him. And one of the things, which again is why I'm so just grateful to kind of grow up the way that I did, is they let me fail. They let me make mistakes. And I don't necessarily consider them failures. I consider them learning opportunities. Right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, kind of saying. And I learned a lot, and having that trust with people as well allowed me to push through a lot of the hurdles. Sometimes it was only one hurdle, sometimes it was 35 hurdles, and other times I couldn't get past the hurdle, and I'd have to find, another way around, or another way to do the same thing, just without costing as much money.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's cool. That's very cool to hear. I guess two more things. I know we've been talking for a while. One, I want to go back because I know a lot of people that know you or follow you is because of YouTube and because of your social media side and stuff. What is some advice you would leave with people on content creation? Like, should other individuals consider becoming a content creator? And or is there a way that you think businesses in our industry should look at using YouTube or social platforms more? Like, what's some of your just feedback for people around, the experience you've had with that and some advice?
I think as an individual, this is actually very true because, again, I was in a corporate world, and I would say like the last 6 months that I worked there, it was kind of a running joke that, oh, Dylan's just running around making YouTube videos and all this other stuff, when in reality, it was actually bringing in a lot of opportunity for the business. I did it more for myself, to create a name for myself in case of the event that I left and I wanted to do my own thing, that I would have a backup. So learning how to be on camera was a struggle. And I still struggle sometimes, but I've kind of gotten past that. I'm like, whatever, my face is on the internet kind of thing. But I would say it is very powerful to document what you're doing. And I'm not talking about like a vlog, but I'm talking about, if you're a startup company, you're somebody that's new into the industry, just demonstrating what you can do is already putting out 10 times more value than a massive corporation that just talks about statistics all day long, right? Where if you are that service worker, you are that guy out in the field that's bushwhacking for, the party chief, or you're that drone pilot, or you're that architect, just record your screen or record some of the stuff that you're doing and just kind of talk about the project that you're working on. You never know who's actually watching and what opportunities can come from that. So many opportunities have come from just the simple stuff that I have put out, all the way down to hiring pilots, to finding new clients to work with and set this stuff up. One of the videos that I posted almost 2 years ago, talking about this project that I flew, was a 750-acre project that I did for a client. A new engineer got brought onto the project, was researching how to leverage aerial LiDAR for his project, ended up finding out that the project that he's working on was the one that I already did. And so he contacted me, and I reflew another section for an updated map. Out of all of the people that had watched that video, it just took one person to watch it to give me another opportunity, another job.
Yep.
And what's great about YouTube stuff in general is it's evergreen. Like I said, that video happened 2 years ago.
Yep.
And then the guy found it 2 years later and hired me for a project where I've made 5 figures on it already.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yep.
And then I would say for companies that are looking to leverage social media, not in the sense that they have been nowadays, where they just throw up an infographic or throw up a statistic or do a simple product release. Working either within the company or finding somebody who is a massive advocate, an influencer, as much as I don't like using that word. Yes, we are influencers.
Yep.
Working with those people can bring a completely different perspective to it. Most people, right, they know Tremble, they know DroneDeploy, they know DJI, right? And you can get the whole sales pitch from the horse's mouth. You're going to take it with a grain of salt. They're like, okay, well, it's 40% better, 20% lighter, yada, 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 right? We can look at those specs all day long. Whereas working with an influencer or an advocate of the technology, where they can break it down for their specific use case or their approach to leveraging the technology, gives a entirely different view on that product, whether it's a hardware or a software product. And you can do the same thing within your corporation too, of just talking about your product and being more transparent about it. Not saying that companies aren't transparent, but I feel like sometimes there's this kind of facade that is put up, this whole corporate facade, which I think we're kind of past that now. I try and be as genuine as possible on camera. When most people meet me in person, they're like, wow, you're the same as on camera. And I'm like, I hope so. Like, I don't want to be fake to people, because I like to be genuine. And that's the best way to reach across kind of the millennial corporate world, where it's okay to be authentic. It's okay to be human. And I think people more so appreciate that approach as opposed to the traditional methods of marketing, because marketing works regardless. But having that different approach, having that evergreen content, which I think is super powerful for YouTube, where I've had companies pay me tens of thousands of dollars for a video, but they only need to sell the product once within that video to pay for the entire thing. Where as a corporation, you're probably spending $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 a month on marketing, but you don't fully know if that source is bringing you all that stuff. Where on YouTube, you pay that $5,000, $10,000, $30,000 once, and now it lives there indefinitely.
Yep.
You never have to pay for that video again, as opposed to continuing to pay for ads with Facebook or Meta and Google. So it's definitely scary for a lot of people that don't understand it. But I would say take that leap of faith, maybe find somebody, or whether they're within your organization, it can be that young 20-year-old, that you just hired, that intern, and have them start making videos about your stuff. And it doesn't even have to be videos. It could just be a little, talking thing or whatever else it may be. Just talking about it, putting it out there, and giving a different perspective is much better than, I would say, the traditional ways. And that's just my personal experience with it, right? Everyone's mileage may vary with it, but that's what I have to say about it.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I mean, everybody sees all kinds of other, like you said, we don't always like the word, but it makes sense, influencers in other industries, right? And I think that our industry has not really seen much of it. Like, there's not been influencers in construction technology and surveying, and that's like pretty rare. And yet we have a small community that have started growing, following on different platforms that are reviewing different technologies, that are talking about use cases. And those people typically started by trying to just do it in a way to educate, and they actually have industry experience. So it's also not like just a facade again of like, I have these followers, I'll just talk about it and sell it. Like and I think there's a difference there for people to watch out for even too, is like, you're not going, if a company in our industry is like, hey, I want to use an influencer to get awareness. Well, if you go to someone on Instagram or whatever, just because they have 1 million followers, you still have to question, well, who's their followers and what type of audience do they have and who do they talk to? If the goal is really educating the right audience, then our industry actually has a need and a space for influencers that build a genuine community around the built environment to talk about the different tools and processes and struggles. And so it's really cool to see some of that grow, different YouTube channels, different LinkedIn, different different events. I think there's just room for more of it, and it's cool to kind of see some of the early adoption and growth in that area.
And it's all new. A lot of these, actually and it speaks to my millennialism, if that's even a word. MKBHD is one of the YouTube channels that I watch. I think he's got like 16 million subscribers. This is a guy who, when he was 16 years old, started on YouTube, started making videos to the point where now he's getting invited to go to Apple at their press events, to be one of the press, to talk about a new product, where he's getting invited to all of these Lucid Air, Tesla. Getting into that space is like insane to see. And he's more broad technology, where we're more so focused on the reality capture side of it. And again, we're here to educate, inspire, and just bring new ideas to the table, right? We have access to these tools to leverage and show people where most people would never even have access to this stuff. And I think that's what's really cool. But again, I try and take all of the stuff that I do as genuine as possible. I'm not gonna take a script from a company and overpromise, the world. I'm gonna tell them, if it sucks, it sucks. And I'm gonna be authentic as possible with it, because I truly believe in that. And that's my brand. Where as long as I stay true to that, I'm gonna be fine. And as soon as I take a handout for something else, and a company is like, well, just talk about this kind of, I would never feel authentic after that.
Exactly. Yeah. I do the same thing. I've always told people, as I started building my podcast and building our conference, and we're looking at like, yes, we are taking on sponsorships. Yes, we have vendors. Like, when you're building a business, there is that sense of like, well, how are we going to afford to grow? Even if our mission and our goal is education and being authentic, there's a balance there of like, yes, but we're only going to take sponsors that we believe in, or like we're only going to rep products or something if we believe in it. because once you lose that authenticity, or you do something that is like, hey, I don't really think that's the best option, but I'm going to sell it anyways, you're going to lose all credibility, right? You lose trust. And that's where I think, especially people who are building on any social platform, really being yourself, giving your thoughts, giving your perspective. And sometimes you might even be wrong, right? Like I might share, hey, I think this terrestrial scanner is the best fit for this project. Maybe I don't know about this other one, and maybe it's, but speaking the knowledge you have and the research you do, I think is super, super important.
And it's also, at the end of the day, it's other people making their buying decisions off of our opinions. So I would hate to be the guy that sold a $70,000 solution that is junk to somebody. I would feel awful.
Yep.
Because I am cheap myself. I don't like spending money if I don't have to.
Yep.
And even when I had to spend the money on my equipment that ultimately didn't work, yes, it was a learning opportunity, but it still sucked.
Yes.
Like I wish I knew that I could have bought something for a third of the price that would have achieved the same thing. So that's kind of the mindset that I do have behind it as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, as we wrap up, and I know there's probably some things in development, we've talked a little behind the scenes, but what are some things that people can expect? Like, what are you doing? What's coming up for you, or what are some of the things you're working on moving forward?
Yeah, so I am announcing very soon that I am expanding my education opportunities for in-person workshops. I'm working with 2 companies here in the U.S., potentially RCN might be on that as well, to give other opportunities for people, because I am a one-man band right now, and I can't be in every single state at the same time.
Even though you're trying.
I'm trying the best that I can right now. If only they can have a time machine.
Yes.
That would be amazing. Anyways, I'm expanding in different areas to do more hands-on workshop with individuals and corporations to just learn more about drone photogrammetry, mapping, LiDAR, really just the world of drones, because it's so expansive. But I just want to teach the fundamentals of it. I'm getting to do more YouTube stuff here soon, launching more courses, working with other instructors, having other subject matter experts, whether they're doing solar panel inspections or methane detection or transmission and distribution inspection, having people that have been out in the field teach actually how to apply that so other people can start taking advantage of that knowledge, because knowledge is power, as we know. And I am traveling international next year, so I'll be doing some workshops with some STEM kids in Africa, working with some companies out in Europe and doing some stuff down in South America. So I'm super excited to just be expanding globally, and just teaching. I love this. It's fun. It's so powerful to be able to help somebody, even if it's just one person, a year. If I can do that, then I'm accomplished.
Yep.
So,
well, that's awesome. Well, it's cool to see people find a lane that they love, find a way to get passionate about it, and start, digging in and helping others. So again, appreciate you coming and sharing some of that. So as we wrap up, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with whoever's listening?
Educate yourself. I mean, there's so much to learn about all of this. I'm still learning, and I've been doing this professionally for 6 years. I feel like it's a non-stop grind to even just keep up with the new tech that's coming out, let alone the existing technology that's out there. So if you can find, there's this rule that I heard, if you can get 1% better every day, a year from now, 365% better, you're looking like a different person in a good way.
Oh, absolutely.
So I don't know. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Well, that's a good, I like that. It's a good one to leave people with. So many people do, they get stuck in what they're focused on that day, and they do that every single day, and they have those walls up. And I think that's one of the fun things about what we're doing with podcasts and with YouTube and is like, some of these things are really easy to get into, to listen to watch. You can do it on your way to work. Maybe not watch, but you could listen. Yeah. And then when you get to work, you can watch on your lunch break, or continuing to learn. Like you can't go wrong with that. You have to stay learning. Yeah. And if you ever, a couple more thoughts, right? The people say this all the time too, is like, you never want to be the smartest person in the room, right?
Right.
Like, learn to be a learner, no matter how smart or how much of an expert you become. Is like, always keep that mindset of whoever you're around, even if you know more than they do, and always approach relationships and conversations of like, what can I learn from you? Be humble, be a consistent learner, because we're never going to stop learning.
And take criticism as well. Be able to take criticism. Most people, they take their wrong information and will run it with it for the rest of their life, and that's kind of what hurts a lot of industries too. Mm-hmm. So be open to change.
All right. Well, I think that's a good ending spot. Lots of conversation today around drones, around social media, around content creation, and I think we'll inspire a couple people even today.
Hopefully just one.
At least one. All right. We'll see you guys again soon.
Thank you.